Hey guys, welcome back. It's your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I am here with another top 5 solitaire games for you. And this one I'm going to do a little different than I did the previous one. It's not going to be in a ranked order. This is just 5 games that I think are good solitaire games, and I'm not going to address like every solitaire game that's been released since I did the last one. I'm only going to cover games that I have actually played myself. And there's so many games out there that I don't want to, overlook some of them. So I'm going to pick from the ones that I've personally covered and did video reviews for over the past so many months and just, tell you a little bit about them. There is one that was talked about on my previous video, and I want to include it on this video, and that's Fields of Fire. And we're giving it an honorable mention because, yes, it is an awesome solitaire game. But Fields of Fire Volume 2 just released. I finally got a notification that it's in the mail on the way to me. So I'm going to actually wait until I cover Part 2 and see some of the differences and the new things that have been released with this version of the game. And that one will probably be on my next top 5. So don't go putting in the comments like, hey, where's Fields of Fire? I'm going to have Fields of Fire included, but it'll probably be the old breed since that's Marines and more up my alley once I actually get to cover that game. Okay, so the first one I'm covering is going to catch a lot of you guys by surprise. I know because it's not one of the usual ones that I cover, but I have been trying to kind of expand my palette of what I specifically cover on the channel. And that's going to be BlackStone Fortress. It's a game by Games Workshop, and it is a miniatures type game, which I don't cover a whole lot of miniatures, but I have been trying to cover more of them because minis are just becoming such a huge part of the hobby. Damn near everything released on Kickstarter now has, a bucket of miniatures included with it. And when it comes to Games Workshop, I'll readily admit I'm not their biggest fan. I've never been Games Workshop biggest fan because I do not like their pricing models. I'm not going to get all into it because there's so many people who have already covered it as far as Games Workshop is concerned that they are just ungodly expensive when it comes to their products. But when it comes to their box sets, I do think these are a little more cost effective for what you're actually getting because the components themselves are outstanding. I will give it to it. BlackStone Fortress has excellent components. All the tiles are nice and thick. The miniatures themselves, they're the same type of miniatures that are included in their 40K games, so they're good quality. You do have to put them together and paint them yourselves if you do want to. And that's actually one of the reasons that I'm including this game on there is that it's another aspect. Now, not everyone enjoys painting miniatures. I do. I enjoy just sitting there and relaxing, watching a movie, and painting some minis. And the ones that come with BlackStone Fortress are excellent. They are high quality minis, and they are just a blast to sit there and paint. I did a video, and you guys can see how well I've done. Now, I'm not the best painter in the world. I'm nowhere near, but I turn out some decent looking stuff. And when you get to paint your own minis and then see them there on the board, that does kind of give you a personal feel to the game. Makes you feel a little more involved when it's a character that you've crafted yourself and now it's fighting the evil minions or, whoever you're actually fighting. In this game, it's set on, obviously, a BlackStone Fortress, which we're not going to go into all the lore of Games Workshop. There's plenty, which, by the way, the books and novels are great. I do read a lot of those. I would recommend those. But you're going through with a squad of very varied characters that are trying to get down into the depths of this fortress and find whatever treasures that they're after and defeat the evil forces of chaos along their way. Now, one of the things I was surprised about when it came to BlackStone Fortress is that it is a relatively long game. You do have to play through multiple campaigns to see everything that the game has to offer because not all of the enemies are actually available as enemies from the start of the game. As you progress further in and you unlock more of the secrets of the BlackStone Fortress, you will slowly start adding more and more enemy cards to the deck that can potentially be drawn from as you go through your campaign. So you'll start out against easier foes, obviously, but as your characters level up and get a little bit stronger and you find more gear and the other, supplies that you're looking for as you're moving through, they'll slowly be adding, harder characters like Beastmen and Chaos Space Marines. And then eventually, of course, you'll have to fight the Chaos Space Marine Lord, which is the head enemy that comes with the base game. Now, one of the other cool aspects of this game is that it does have expansions released for it. There's one that's already released now, and another that either has just released or is getting ready to release. I'm not entirely sure. That does add actually more heroes for you to play as. So that's another cool aspect. Now, there is plenty of game in the base box. If you only got the base box itself, it would supply you with plenty of gameplay for hours on end for you or a group if you wanted to do that way. But of course, this is Solitaire. And the thing is this is a co-op game. So you can play all the characters yourself and you don't have to worry about having anyone there with you. And you do kind of get to feel the story out as you go down level through level. Without getting into every single detail, the short version is each one of your character has so many dice and you'll take and roll those dice. And depending on what roll you get, tells you what skills that your characters get to use. So some skills can be used with a 1 or higher on a d6, and some skills might be very powerful and you need to roll a 6 to be able to potentially use that skill, whether it cloaks you or allows you to use a very hard hitting attack. And that gives you a little bit of tension as you're moving through the essentially what's a dungeon. And you know that, hey, this roll is important because if I get this, 6, or if I get a couple of 6s, that I can move up close and get a real big attack and take these guys out, and we can find the next elevator and keep pushing our way through the fortress. But if I don't get it, then the enemies will swarm us and we'll all be killed. All the different characters do operate differently as well. There are some characters that are more of support, where they'll kind of hang back and help heal or shoot from a distance, like your sniper type characters. Or you have my favorite, which is the robot, and he gets in there, point blank range, takes the hits from the enemy, is most likely to shrug them off and then, keep getting in the enemy's faces and taking them out. So I like that variety of different types of characters. And you do have the ability that if someone does get killed off during the campaign, you have extra characters that you can bring into it and continue your campaign on, and even potentially bring a character back from the death if you play it the right way and things go in your direction. One other bonus that does come from BlackStone Fortress, and this is something Games Workshop is doing that I think is actually a good idea because it does bring people into other aspects of their hobby, is that you can use the models from BlackStone Fortress in their Kill Team games. And if you haven't played Kill Team, I've got a few videos up on it, but you can look up plenty more on YouTube. Kill Team is like Squad's small version of their 40K games. So more man-to-man combat instead of squad-to-squad combat like 40K is. And in a way, it's a good business model because it gives you a taste and it gets you into it. So you try BlackStone Fortress and you like that. So then you're like, okay, well, I've already got models that I can use directly in a Kill Team. And in fact, you can take and play Kill Team alone, as long as you got the rules and the components you need, of course, with just the models that come in the base box, because you can have the evil forces against the good forces as 2 separate kill teams, which is nice that you have all that. You don't have to invest that money into a separate kill team if you don't want to. But their ultimate goal, obviously, is to get people to go from BlackStone to Kill Team to 40K, because that's where they're really going to make some of their big money from you. But if you just want to take and play BlackStone, you're fine. It's a great dungeon diving game that gives you that modern feel where you have high-end weapons and robots and snipers and droids and big guns and, even some spells and weird things like that happening. So I definitely recommend giving BlackStone Fortress a try if you're into painting minis, miniatures-based games, and you like a dungeon-type crawl. Okay, next up on our list is going to be one that's a little more traditional for what you usually see on this channel. and that's going to be Picket Duty by Legion Games. And I can pretty much describe this to you in, just a couple of words. Silent Victory, The Hunters. All right, if you like those style games, target for today, the ones, I don't want to say simplistic. They're not overly simplistic. Picket Duty isn't. There's a fair amount going on with that game. They're not component heavy games. Now, the components that are in Picket Duty are decent. They're not the best that I've ever seen, but they are perfectly fine for the gameplay itself. And in this one, you're taking and controlling a destroyer off the coast of some islands and whatnot in Japan during World War II, or near Japan rather. And you're fighting off kamikaze attacks there towards the end of World War II. But it plays along the similar lines of the other games I mentioned, Silent Victory and The Hunters, in that you have your main vessel, whatever it is, submarine, bomber. In this case, you're controlling a destroyer, and you're picking what targets you're going to go after with what weapons, and then what crew are going to do what. This one I like a little more than some of the others because you do have a fair bit more going on. People who've played games like Target for Today, and I don't want to single that one out, but some of them can seem more like just you're rolling the dice, but you're not making a whole lot of decisions. Those were some of the criticisms on the older ones. And you definitely don't have that problem when it comes to Picket Duty because you do get to make a lot of different choices during the game course of the gameplay. Not only on what weapons you're using to attack what planes, because depending on what vector they come in from, you can't use all your weapons. Like your 5-inch guns might not be able to reach all the different vectors, but you have more than one, then you have some 40 mils and then some 20 mils, and you have to decide, okay, well, are these guns targeting which planes, and I can only shoot them with these specific guns, and that gives you a nice sense of depth. And plus you have other things at your disposal as well, like some fighter escorts that are represented just by extra counters. So you have those to use as well, and you'll have to divide your guns up accordingly around. And after you've completed your dividing up your attacks, you'll take and roll off to see which enemy planes have been shot down. And then depending on how the rolls go, of course, the enemy planes will continue on with their attack. So they'll be shot down and aborted, or they could be shot and burning and still crash into your ship. So it's story-esque. You can play through a series of campaigns and see how long your destroyer can make it throughout the campaign that you're playing, and you'll definitely take damage and lose crew. And one of the even cooler parts of it is that your crew do have stats that you have to keep track of as well, like your captain and your first officer and your chief engineer. You'll roll off on these things prior to starting your game, and it will tell you, you'll keep it down on your crew sheet, what their skill level is, so they can potentially have a higher skill level and do better at whatever job they're doing, or you might potentially have a penalty that you have to account for during the course of your gameplay. And you do have the chance, though, that if you lose characters, you can take and get replacements to fill into those shoes, which is good, so you'll never be out of crew per se. But one of the things to understand about this game is it is a very heavy dice rolling type game. If you are not into that, looking through charts, chart after chart, oh my god, it's got a whole lot of charts in it, and that's to be expected when it comes to this type of game. If that's not something that you enjoy, you don't like sitting down and keeping track of the different maths and counters and numbers and figures that you have to throughout the course of the game, this is not one for you. But if you are one that's into the Hunter, Silent Victory, the whole ilk where you control a ship or vessel, whichever it is, throughout the course of a campaign, and you just kind of see what the dice decide to do to you this day as you mitigate it as best you can with your choices, then definitely check out Picket Duty. It is an excellent example of games in this series. All right, the next one we're going to cover is, best way to put it, is just a classic. Just one of the best war games I've ever played, hands down. I absolutely love this. and it is designed by a legend in the industry, and that is, of course, Enemy Action Ardennes by Compass Games, and it was designed by John Butterfield. John Butterfield, has done the D-Day series, D-Day at Omaha and Tarawa and those types. And his games are very complex, full of chrome, very deep, hardcore hex encounter games. So if you don't like hard games, if you don't like ones that you really need to sink your teeth into and get your head wrapped around, that has a lot of chrome, that has a whole lot of meat in the rule book to really dig your teeth into, then these are a hard pass for you. But if you want to taste some of the best solitaire wargaming that is out there that you can find, then you would be hard pressed to pass up a game like Enemy Action Ardennes. Now, this game does come with a lot of versions. It's almost 3 games in one box, because you have the 2 solitaire versions and then you have the competitive version. Okay, so you have playing as the Germans, Solitaire, then you have playing as the Allies, Solitaire, and then you have each side fighting each other, where you're playing against an actual real life person. Now, I've only played the German portion of the game. That is the easier portion of the game to learn. And I gotta say, I absolutely loved it. I loved everything about it, but it did take me a while. I had to sit down with the rule book, read through it once just to try to get some of it into my head, and then I sat down with the rule book with the game components laid out, go through it again, go through some examples. And you're going to make mistakes as you try to learn this game. It's not the easiest game to learn, but it is absolutely well worth your effort. Once you get done, you'll have an experience unlike many others in the gaming series. Definitely, if you like the D-Day series, you'll understand what I'm talking about with the type of gameplay Butterfield puts out. It's just excellent, and representing the different types of combat that are out there, and especially this, based on the Battle of the Bulge, the restrictions that the Germans have, especially on their first turn. I forgot to say the game is obviously set during Battle of the Bulge. The German attack through the Ardennes forest, and the Allies get caught flat-footed, and then they have to repel this large German last thrust, trying to push them back. And like I was just saying, they do have some restrictions there in the first turns, where all the turns are divided into the dates. And it's, I believe it's like the 16th through I can't remember where the date ends on it, but I remember it starts on the 16th, and they have German traffic jams, so you can't move your units around that well, and then you have to worry about the fact that they're getting log jammed on the bridges, and that is represented in game as well. So you can't just wipe the Allies off the map there at the beginning. You do have those restrictions, but after that does get lifted. And now, one of the things you'll notice about this game is that it is not a dice-based game. It's a chip pull game for the combat resolution. And that's one of the biggest parts that just blew my mind. And it's hard to describe unless you've actually played it, but you'll organize your forces as best you can. Because, of course, you want the best combat odds going in your favor. Your combat strength versus their defensive strength. You want to outnumber them as best you can, so the odds may ever be in your favor. And you'll take and start drawing out chits, and you'll get so many chits depending on your combat results. We won't get into all the specifics, but you want to have as many results as you can, but sometimes it doesn't behoove you to draw too many, but sometimes it does. And that's where the chrome and the depth of this game comes, because you have to make those little decisions like, should I draw so many more chits? Maybe that's a good thing this time. Maybe it's not. Some of the chits could help the enemy, could help the defensive guy. So which way is going to be in my best favor? And the short version of it is you'll draw out so many chits, however you decided it. You'll have a minimum and a maximum to deal with. And they'll say things like, if you have a combat odds of at least, 3-1 or 4-1, that's a point in your favor. And then if you have air support, or if you have combined arms, infantry and tanks committed to the attack, or if you have elite forces, involved in this attack. Whatever the situation is represented on the chit, you'll take, and they'll either count for you or against you, and you won't be able to use them. But it tallies up the amount of hits, and it'll show on the counter, how many hits are going towards the attackers versus the defenders. And that's how you get it. So you don't have to worry about rolling dice when it comes to the combat factors. You'll just figure out which chits are actually considered correct and applicable to the combat situation at hand. And then you'll play those. And they do have results on both sides. So if they're not there on the front, you look on the back. If neither apply, then it's, pushed off to the side. But it's a completely unique combat system. I have never seen in any other gameplay before. And it's elegant in its simplicity, because even when you're first starting the game, you can understand what the chits are referring to. But it gives so much variety and replayability to the game, because think of it this way. All the units are going to start in the same place each game. So if you were playing the game with dice, you would know, okay, these units always start here at the start of the game, and they can only attack these enemy units. So at best, my combat odds can be this, and I can only roll, 1 to a 6 if you're using D6. So you would have a good idea whether or not you're going to win that attack if you were using dice. But since you're using chits, it's effectively, I think it's 60 counters. It's effectively a 60 side dice. There's no way for you to have any idea of what chits you're going to draw out of the cup and in what order they're going to be drawn, which can change and which can affect things as well. So that first attack that you can plan out to the best of your ability, you'll never know how it's going to pan out. It can always be different from the previous way that you've played the game. And that's not even getting into the rest of the aspects that come into the game when it comes into roadblocks and retreats and moving units and resupplies and reinforcements and different units becoming available at different times. We haven't even touched on the fact that it's card-based system that you're using to even activate your units. The game is deep. It is excellent. All right, I don't want to get into all the rules because there's just so much to it. I do have to address one downside to the game, and some people have talked about this before, that the game has a lower quality when it comes to the components. The cards are a little thinner, the counters are a little thinner, and they are. So I'm not going to lie to you about that. It does make you wish for a little bit thicker components for the map, the cards, the counters, all of it. They're just a little bit flimsier than they should be, especially for the price point of the game, which is high. I think I ended up getting it for about $120. I think it retails for about $1.50, and that's before you even get into shipping. So the cost for the game is high. I want you to understand that right up front. But the gameplay in the box is absolutely worth it. It is a unique experience you're not going to find damn near anywhere else. So it is worth the price of admission if you can afford it. It's just a big price of admission. All right, the next one we're going to talk about is actually one that I covered very recently. Actually, I just put up one of the later videos just a few days ago, and that is Uboat the Boardgame by Phalanx Games. And I gotta say, I loved this game. This was an outstanding game that had a very unique aspect to it. And this is going to be the either biggest draw for you to try it out, or it's going to be the biggest drawback and make you say, I will never play the game ever. And that's the fact that it is app driven. So you do have to have a computer or a phone or a tablet or something with you to play the game. You cannot play this game without that component at all. So, like I said, there's some purists out there that will say, nope, board games do not have electronic components like this, so you won't try it. And that's fine. Free world, do what you want. That's fine if you don't want to try it out. But those of you who do enjoy app-based gaming and have that addition to your game, oh my God, it is so worth it. I love how that works. And without getting, again, long-winded on it, the basic gist is it can be 1 to 4 players. But again, speaking from the solitaire component, you're going to control 4 different stations, 4 different main people. And that's your captain, your navigator, your engineer, and your first officer. And each one of those have different aspects of controlling the U-boat under their purview. The captain, of course, is going to captain. He's going to take and pass down the orders of what all the different stations are going to do. He'll decide where to move, how to move, who to shoot, what to shoot, and all the other good stuff that goes along with that. The navigator, of course, is going to navigate, keep plotted on the map of where you are, and then when you actually get into tactical combat, we'll have a little tactical map where he'll take and keep track of where the enemy ships are, your ship, and direct the first officer what coordinates and course and stuff like that to enter into the app. Speaking of the first officer is going to control the tablet or the computer and keep track of like the electronic gameplay, among a few other little things that he keeps track of. And he has the first aid, so the medical component as well. Engineer obviously keeps track of the engine and repairing the ship. So, and not only just the engine. When I say engine, there's diesel and electrics that you have to use when you're underwater. So you have to keep track of all that. Now, I know that sounds like a lot, and it is. That's one of the drawbacks when it comes to this game, Solitaire, is there is so much going on that it can feel a little overwhelming when you're playing the game Solitaire like that you're trying to captain and make the choices that you're going to make, but you're also over here trying to plot and then figure out what course and speed, and then you have to reach over and enter in all the stuff into the app as well because you're the first officer as well. Good part about that is the app does have a pause function that you can abuse as much as you want, and I absolutely recommend that when you're playing Solitaire. That does take away a little bit of the tension aspect of the game. If you were playing it for a player, obviously they don't recommend that you pause it because they want you to feel that time pressure that you're right there on them and they're closing in and the escort might find you and the captain's having to issue orders. Unfortunately, you just can't do that when you're playing it Solitaire because there are just too many things to keep track of. And that's fine. Don't deprive yourself of the experience just because you have to pause it to make sure you're making the choices that you really want to make. Speaking along those lines, it does have a lot of components. They are good quality components, excellent as far as the game is concerned. All the cards are nice and thick. The counters are nice and thick. Nothing feels weak and flimsy, with the exception of the fact that it does have a 3D U-boat model, and that's where you're taking and moving around your little sailor miniatures because you have to put them in different positions to operate different things, whatever they're trying to do, whether it's shoot the gun or control the engine or use the periscope. You have to have your little guys in the right position during the course of the game. The U-boat itself is made out of the same stuff that the rest of the game is, cardboard. And if you just put it together without using anything else, it doesn't hold together that well. So I would recommend gluing it. Don't necessarily glue it all together. When you take and pick it out, you'll see what I mean. But the ship itself has 3 main sections of cardboard that you put together, and then there's the conning tower as well. So it'll be 4 parts of the U-boat. I would glue those 4 parts together so they hold firm, and then just slot them together without using glue to actually put it together for play. That way you can use it and break it down for gameplay, but it'll hold firm and without falling over because you will be bumping your little miniatures around as you take and move them around the ship. Honestly speaking, though, I gotta say it's one of the better board game sims for submarine combat that I've ever played. And that largely comes down to the app. It just does so much that can't be done as far as, realism when you're just using paper and cardboards and chits. When you can actually see it on screen and things are moving along in real time, like if you're chasing an enemy convoy ship that you're trying to torpedo, the app will in real time control the fact that the enemy ship is moving along a certain course at a certain speed, and that's going to change relative to you, and you have to adjust yourself and figure out your targeting for your torpedoes and get everything lined up the right way, and then release it. Same thing if you're trying to use your 20 mil cannon for AA, or your 88 mil cannon, which is also on the top of the submarine to take and fire at ships. I wouldn't recommend firing it at escorts because they'll blow you out of the water if you do it that way. One of the things though, and they have been working on this, is that they didn't, I don't think, have the amount of orders and activations tweaked just right for the gameplay. A lot of people were complaining that you ran out of activations and orders when it came to using the game. They have eroded that, and if you are playing it solitaire, I definitely would recommend playing it on a normal or easier setting where it does give you more orders and activations to use with your troops, so you don't take and burn it up and have to wait until the next watch change to be able to give more orders. Otherwise, you would be stuck there waiting for time to go by so you could continue on with your attack if you ran out of orders when you were chasing a convoy or something like that. Seriously, outstanding game, though. One I have thoroughly enjoyed and definitely know I will come back to, and I hope that they keep updating the app, adding extra missions, extra campaigns. I look forward to see what else they add to it as time goes on, or even, extra expansion with, new components. That would be great if they did another Kickstarter later on. Okay, the last one I'm going to cover here is one that I'm sure is probably going to catch you by surprise again, but it is Thunder in the East by Victory Point Games. This is another monster game, and it's one of the ones, a few on this list, that is not a solitaire only game or co-op game. This one is designed for, two players playing against each other. But as board gamers know, a lot of us take and, play both sides to the best of our ability when it comes to hex and counter based war games. And this one does very well for it. You'll remember, if you did see my previous top 5, that I put Unconditional Surrender on there. And I put Unconditional Surrender on there for different reasons than I put this one. But the same basic premise, that it was a large-scale game that could be played solitaire and enjoyed, even though it was designed for more players than, just solitaire. Thunder in the East, I was a little worried about when I first started pulling it out because there were so many components, so many counters. Was not like Unconditional Surrender that was counter light, which made it easier to keep track of things. This one's definitely counter heavy. The map is large. You're going to need a big table because it's 4 sections that you have to put together. There's a large amount of counters. Many different nations that are considered. You've got the Germans, the Hungarians, the Romanians, the Russians. There's so many different units that come into play, and the game has even multiple ways that you can play it, because you can do it as just a single scenario that you're playing, or you can link together the scenarios, or you can even go all the way with a full-scale campaign through a huge portion of the war if you want to do that way and link all the scenarios. And then there's extra even bonus rules, optional rules that you don't have to include if you want a simpler style gameplay. And when I actually did my review series on this game, I played it in the simpler format just because I didn't have enough time to, play a monster game, monster learning game before I actually did the film session. So I wanted to have it easy enough that I could play it and film it at the same time. And that's where this game excelled. The rule book is really the key to playing the solitaire, because a lot of times when it comes to monster games, there's just so many rules, so much chrome, so much stuff that you have to worry about that you'll get so bogged down with it that it makes it almost impossible to play it solitaire, because you can't keep track of all the little things that are going on, and you'll feel like you're making mistakes all the time. And you really don't feel like that with Thunder in the East. It feels like a monster game that has been streamlined to the point that it just plays smoothly. And a big portion of that also comes down to the player aids that they've included. Because one of the aspects that I worried about is there's a lot of exchanging of counters when it comes to the different units, because units can either be built up or broken down into larger, smaller, different sizes. And there's a lot of rules when it comes to it, but I was worried about being able to keep track of all that. The player aids, especially the two main player aids, one for the Germans and one for the Soviets, have little diagrams directly on the player aids with a nice, easy to see and read picture that shows you this unit plus this unit equals this unit, or this unit minus this unit becomes this unit, something along those lines. And they were divided up into your force pool and your change box. So if you were just changing units, you knew to get it from your change box. And the way to think of it was, as you put units in, other units came out, but it always had to stay flush, kind of like a cash register. But then you had your force pool, which is your basic reserves where you could take and deploy excess units to the board. It was just divided up in such a way that it made it easy to keep track of a large amount of things going on without feeling like you were getting bogged down. And that's where I think this game excels as a solitaire game. I know there's not a whole lot of people out there who do enjoy it, like, thousands, millions, whatever, but there are a fair amount of people who do enjoy the thought or the idea of playing a big monster game like this. And this isn't the biggest monster I've ever seen, but it's fairly up there. But they don't want to get bogged down in all those rules. And I really think that Victory Point Games did an excellent job streamlining this so well with the player aids, with the rule book itself, broken down to the basic game, to the optional rules, to the campaign rules, so you could pick and choose which portions of the game you wanted to make the best experience for you. And that includes things like the air power being involved, paratroopers, supply, how all of that worked was done in such a streamlined fashion to make it the best game possible. I really think they play tested the hell out of this thing to do the best job. Now, it's not the most perfect game that I've ever seen ever, but it's up there. They did an excellent job. Speaking of the components as well, components are great. Counters are great. It does have paper maps. I'm not going to hate on it too much for paper maps, because plenty of war games have paper maps, and they're thick enough that you don't feel like you are going to tear them. I would, however, definitely put this game under plexiglass at a minimum, just because it is so large. You're probably not going to finish it in an evening unless you just dedicate a sole day to nothing but this. But you'll probably end up leaving it up for a few days. So it'll make it a little easier if you have it all under plexiglass, counters on the top, so you don't bump the maps and lose track of what you're doing. But getting back to what I was saying about the ease of play, I mentioned one of the stretch goals this game had was the supply dice. And it wasn't dice in the sense of the word that you would normally think that you were going to roll them. It was just a simple 6-sided dice that had the different supply radiuses. You guys let me know down in the comment if I'm butchering that or not. The different radii of the different supply points. So if you had a city that gave out a supply radius, or whichever location, you could take and put one of those dice next to it, and it was bright yellow. It stood out on the board, and it made it very easy at a glance to see what your supply status was. And the neat part about that is the other side is the one that determined your supply, kind of like to keep you honest type thing. So when the Germans started their turn, for example, the Germans would do, going down the sequence of play, part of their sequence of play would be to determine the Russian units' supply status, whether they were in supply or out of communication, whatever the case may be. And by using those dice, you could very easily, at a glance, look at the map and say, okay, these units are within the supply radius, these units aren't. So these units are in supply, these units aren't, and you could get them marked and taken care of very quickly. It's stuff like that all the way across the game in the rulebook, in the player aids, and then also in the reference book that they included. They did everything they could to make a big, deep game as easy to play as possible. I think other developers should take notice of a lot of the steps that they took for this game and include them in their games, because it just made the game so easy to play. It was fun. It did not feel like a chore. I did not feel like I was working at it. I felt like I got to sit down and enjoy the results of the combat that played out in front of me instead of worrying about digging into the rule book, which I am happy to say. One of the things that I look for is like, how many times do I have to go digging back in the rule book to figure something out? I did not have to do that often when it came to Thunder in the East, which is, unusual when it comes to a game of that size. Between the player aids and the reference book that came with it, you did not need to dig into it that much. Now, to be fair, when I was playing it, I was playing it on the simplest version, just the Barbarossa scenario, without any of the optional rules or the campaign rules. But I do not believe it would have been that difficult to add those extra rules into it after how well the previous versions of it played. So when it comes to, a Eastern theater game, especially monster game, if you're looking for one that you want to play solitaire, have up on the table and just kind of let it play out over the course of the war and just see how things go, there are very few I could recommend over this. It is outstanding game, great components, great rules, obviously, and they are expanding it further because they're going to keep going with different games in the series. I think the next one's covering the Mediterranean, and then they're going to cover Europe itself. So by the time it's done, if you want the monster of all monster war games, you'll be able to cover like the whole of the European theater for the war with all these different box sets if you put them all together, because they are going to be designed to overlap and show the entire theater. That's just going to be mind-blowing. I mean, you'll need a huge amount of space for it, but if they do as well on those games as they have done with these games, or this game rather, it's going to be excellent and definitely well worth trying out. All right, that's going to be it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed this top 5. Like I said, these 5 weren't in any specific order, just top 5 solitaire games that I've enjoyed. And I will probably end up doing another one of these a few months down the road once I take and try a few more games and get them under my belt, have some more lined up. And like I said, I know some people were thinking it already. Fields of Fire will definitely be in the next one, but I want to try out the old breed and see how that goes before I take and put it in my next top 5 solitaire games. All right, that's going to be it for me. You guys take care. I'll catch you in the next one.